She is one of the top analysts in the game, one of the top color commentators in the game, and it is always my great pleasure, especially with the big fight week upon us at UFC 304. It is always my pleasure to speak to the great Laura Sanko. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well, Damon. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for jumping on for me. Now, before we get to all these great fights at UFC 304, I have to ask you about this past weekend, because one of my favorite things that the UFC social team and the production team has done is giving us things that are beyond fight content. And one of my favorite things is the reaction from the commentators when these big moments happen. You know, we all remember Daniel Cormier with the Thug Rose, and you know, Joe Rogan looking like someone literally dropped a bomb in his pants. But you had a bit of a different reaction this week. I saw on your Instagram, which I was cracking up about. You literally tear your wardrobe to celebrate these fights.
I did. It was not intentional. I would love to say it was some like awesome Hulk Hogan moment where I was just so moved by the action that I did it intentionally. But no, my pants exploded because I got real animated and I leaned forward really fast. And yeah, they were tight. They were unforgiving in the waist. They were like a looser pant, but very, very tight in the waist. I bought them last year when I was a little bit skinnier, and I had them tailored when I was standing up. And let me tell you something, sit down for 6 hours, put some strain on it. So, yeah, it just, she went, happens. It was a tremendous fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think that shows the sacrifice you're willing to make just to celebrate these fights, because you're literally exploding out of your pants. I mean, that's a real celebration right there.
I am so invested in the action that my pants literally exploded. They couldn't contain the energy that I was giving off for that fight, because that fight was crazy.
I was cracking up. I was like, that is a real celebration. I was like, now you got to one up on Cormier.
It was on camera. The fact that like, it's one thing to have it happen and I wouldn't have said anything about it. But like, as soon as because I think I was reading a highlight, or I was like talking over a highlight, and then they made the reaction cam part of the highlight. So I'm like talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, my pants exploded.
But you soldiered through the rest of the broadcast. That tells you what a true warrior you are, Laura. You soldiered through the rest of the broadcast.
I was much more comfortable, to be honest. It was way better.
I've always said, like, when I go to events, I haven't gone to a lot of events recently. When I used to go to events, I'd always see certain reporters on Media Road. They'd be wearing full suits, jackets, and everything. And I appreciate, getting dressed up for an event. But I was always like a jeans and a polo kind of guy. So I just sit there for like 7.5 hours. You got to be at least, I'm like, shouldn't they allow you guys to wear like sweatpants? Like, you got to be there for like 8 hours. Can't you do like only above the waist shots where they only shoot you like that,
If I could manage to somehow like do the open and then quick change into some sweatpants, I can't tell you what a game changer that would be. I have sweatpants on right now. I may look like I'm dressed for the day upstairs, still have my pajamas on downstairs, if I'm being honest, Damon.
Hey, I'm all for it. I totally understand. So, Laura, of course, UFC 304, a couple days away now. This is an incredible card, and man, I've been so excited because I know the way cards are built. Sometimes we find out less time before we get to announce the fights. This one feels like we've had several months to get amped up for Leon Edwards and Belal Muhammad, Tom Aspinall, Curtis Blaydes, Paddy Pimblett. So, how excited are you just to finally get into this card, go back to manage? I don't know. How do you feel about I know you're not fighting, but like, how do you feel about the whole time thing? Like, they're doing it, like the main event fighters are going to be walking out at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Listen, it's unfortunate for the fans, but I think when that day comes, it's not going to matter for the fans or for the athletes. I think everyone, the energy is going to be so off the charts. It's not going to matter. If you're a fan, and trust me, you're going to be able to soldier through, because the action from these fights is going to be enough to keep you going. Hopefully, here's my one tip: just don't start drinking too early. That's going to be the downfall of at least a certain proportion of this fan base. But I think for the fighters, Leon Edwards actually had this exact same situation when he fought on Michael Bisping's card, where he had his huge win over Dan Henderson in Manchester. So he's familiar with it, and he said the same thing. He said, "Listen, it didn't matter. Like, the moment I walked out to that arena, it could have been 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It could have been 2 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't have known the difference. I was headed into a fight." So I think it sucks probably more in the lead up, the preparation, stressing about how it might affect you. But I think when the time comes, these guys are just going to do their job.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It is interesting, and I get it, But like I said, I mean, I'm weird. Like with jet lag, like I've always experienced like a little bit of jet lag for a day or two, and then you just kind of adjust. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, listen, you stay up a little later, but it's an incredible card, and we're not going to go through every single fight, but obviously want to talk about some of the biggest storylines. And I was actually a little surprised you guys revealed the main card on Saturday during your broadcast, and everyone was, I got a million questions. Like, where did Manel Kape and Muhammad Mokaev go? And it got bumped. It is now the featured prelim. I think it's an incredible matchup. And I think it's clear cut that these are two of the best flyweights in the world. I know Alexandre Pantoja said he's looking at it as a number one contenders fight. I know the UFC doesn't really say that too much anymore because it kind of gets them into trouble when, guys get injured or timing doesn't work out and then that guy or girl doesn't get the next title shot. But on the surface, do you look at Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape as a number one contenders fight?
Yeah, I for sure do, especially in a division where, I mean, we just saw Steve Erceg, challenge for the title. This is a division where it's not that your rank doesn't matter, but there's just so much parity in skill set. And, we're constantly looking for fresh opponents for Pantoja because he's been around this division so long, faced so many of the top guys multiple times. I think in particular for Mokaev, this is a huge opportunity to really make a stamp and really make a statement and make sure that whenever that title conversation happens, that he's on the list.
Mokaev is such a talented young guy. When he first got in the UFC, I was like, this guy's going to be a future champion. I'd seen him fight several times outside the UFC, but once you get in the UFC, we always hear about it. Competition's different. It's different level. He's been winning, he's been finishing guys, but he hasn't been, since fighting Cody Durden early on, he's had, some back and forth fights. We all remember the submission, the knee bar, it looked like he literally got his leg ripped apart. Tim Elliott was having success with him. He hasn't had these like lopsided dominant performances. Is there any part of this, like you feel like he needs to go out and have that kind of a showing against Manel Kape just to kind of cement himself, or is it just about win and nothing else?
Yeah, listen, that's always ideal, of course, right? I mean, you want to be able to come away from the weekend being talked about. And generally that's the way to do that is to have a big finish. But again, this division is one of those spots where this difference in skill set is so small. And I really do believe that you can have a number 8, a number 9 randomly get shoved into a top 1 or 2 fight, and they do really, really well. We just saw it happen. So I guess certainly he's capable of getting a big finish. Does he have to have a big finish to be able to get that shot? I don't know that it's 100% necessary, but always nice to go out there and, make sure and leave no doubt for sure.
And for Manel Kape, I've said if this poor guy didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck at all. Like we do beginning of the year predictions. I think 2 years ago, I said I thought Manel Kape was going to be flyweight champion, and then he had a bunch of fights scheduled that looked like he was going to get there. Davison Figueiredo and Alex Perez, all these big fights, every single one of them fell apart. And then this year, he had a weight cutting issue, which we all know that's certainly not his opponent's fault. And then he injures his ribs, so he gets knocked out of another fight. Now he gets this one. Obviously it seems like we're all steam ahead for this fight, but this is also a huge moment for Manel Kape because he's just been the victim of bad circumstances for like a year and a half now, big fight after big fight falling apart for him. But here he is, pay-per-view, big card, Muhammad Mokaev undefeated in Manchester. This feels like this is also a statement performance for him.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, and against a very nasty opponent. I mean, it's the perfect setup for him to remind everybody what he's about, because if you go back to when, he was actually able to string some fights together, a lot of excitement around him, to your point earlier, I think you can take one look at him and go, man, this guy's got a skill set that could give this entire division some real problems. But when you keep falling off the face of the earth time and time again, even when every time it's not, you're not doing it intentionally, you're not doing it negligently, inevitably there starts to be a bit of a feeling about you, and it's not a good one. And so I think for him to go out there and, just like Mokaev, put some sort of a stamp on things, he can very quickly regain the trust of the fan base if he goes out there and has the right type of performance.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to the main card, listen, there's a lot of intriguing fights, but I think everyone beyond the main and co-main has their eyes on Paddy Pimblett against, let me get it right now, King Green, not Bobby Green, King Green. Listen, I've watched Paddy since long before he was in the UFC when he was in Cage Warriors. I remember being in the back at I think it was UFC 205 when Conor fought Eddie, and we're in the back of Madison Square Garden. I think that's the day Paddy fought Julian Erosa in Cage Warriors. And I think we all were sitting there watching thinking, man, Julian Erosa just won this fight. And then Paddy gets the decision. A little controversy there. A couple of years later, he finally gets to the UFC. Now, I think Paddy Pimblett is an extremely talented guy, but I've always kind of felt there's a bit of a ceiling on him. I didn't have the same feeling about Paddy that I did about guys like Sean O'Malley or Conor McGregor, who were stars, but I also thought these guys are going to be champions. What is the ceiling? Do you feel like this is the kind of fight that's going to show what kind of ceiling he has? Because King Green has been running that fringe top 15 for most of his UFC career. He's never been like a top 5 guy, you know what I mean? But he's always been right like that number 14, number 15 in what is a very, very deep lightweight division. We know how good he is. He's good on the ground, great striking. Is this the perfect measuring stick to see what the ceiling is for Paddy Pimblett? Because again, I've never seen him and said, man, this guy's going to be champion one day. I've just not had that feeling about him.
Yeah, this is certainly the beginning of that stretch of fights, right? So up until this point, Paddy's been proving that he is as good as he said he was in Cage Warriors. And to a large degree, he's made sure on those promises. The reality is he's passed every test that we've put in front of him, some of them controversially, but the fact is when you go to his Tapology page, there's nothing but green in the UFC. And we have to tip our hat to that. King Green, I almost said Bobby, King Green is a different test altogether. You know, to take out someone like Tony Ferguson, a name is always going to be impressive, but I think we all understand where Tony is in his career at this point, and it's not like taking out the Tony Ferguson of 2016. It's just not the same thing. Bobby, dang it, King Green. King Green.
We're all going to do this for a while.
I gotta get it out, and then I'll be done with it. King Green is, man. He's a unique test for anybody, I believe, because of his hand speed. I mean, he is one of the fastest guys and most unique looks on the feet that you are going to find at lightweight. No one fights like him, and he occasionally pays for it, but way more often than not, and certainly with great frequency lately, he has been chalking guys with his hand speed, his position, and just the fact that his strikes are coming from places that it's just really tough to train for. We always talk about, the guys with the really traditional karate stances. You got to find a guy to really mimic that. Good luck finding a guy who can fight like King Green does, in the gym, because he's lightning fast. He throws from his hips. He's got a swag that I think once you see that swag come out in a fight, I can only imagine as the opponent, there's a little part of your brain that goes, oh shit, he's he's found his flow. And when he gets flowing, he's a very dangerous, powerful guy because of how precise and how fast he is. So is this a test for Paddy? Huge test for Paddy. But it's the beginning, I think, of a series of tests that we're going to see him need to pass. He'll have a couple of fights like this where it's fringe top 15, early top 15. And then if he passes those tests, then the ceiling is endless for Paddy. But these are important moments and important times for him to go out there and make good on a lot of promises that he's made the fan base.
Yeah, and we know that King Green is willing to live up to the moment. I mean, listen, we all knew the storyline going into UFC 300. We were also happy for Jim Miller, getting to fight all three of the big events, and he's on this great win streak, looking great. We're like, oh man, and I think we're all guilty of being like, come on, Jim Miller, like we all love Jim Miller. King Green said, no, not so fast. And he went out there and absolutely dominated him for 3 rounds, busted him up, bloodied him. I feel like that's the mentality he needs to have going into Manchester. This is Paddy's backyard. Obviously, the crowd's going to be on his side, but it just seems like King Green relishes these moments.
He does. He loves this stuff. I think this is like his 50th pro fight. I mean, this is a guy who's got a tremendous amount of experience, both the UFC and outside of the UFC. Dwarfs the experience that Paddy has. Paddy's got to he's got to come into this fight with a very defensive mindset. He can't be caught with his chin in the air in this fight. He can't be caught, having undisciplined footwork in this fight. Any mistake that Paddy makes on the feet in particular, King Green is going to make him pay for it because he sees everything happening faster, than the rest of us do. I firmly believe that man's brain works at 1.25 speed and the rest of us are stuck at 1.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, of course, the interim heavyweight title fight is such a big moment for Tom Aspinall to fight at home. Of course, we know his only loss on his UFC record, of course, is the weird, not really a fight. Even Curtis Blaydes says, like, that's not really a win. I don't count that as a win, but it's the one fight he has. And of course, this is the rematch. You know, because of the narrative built around Tom Aspinall wanting to fight John Jones and John Jones being clear about wanting to fight Stipe, there's been a lot of fan support for Tom Aspinall. People saying he's the best heavyweight in the sport. He's the number one guy. He's the real champion, blah, blah, blah. But I always feel like people are just like forgetting Curtis Blaydes, because Curtis is very much, you know, to me, you know, like I said earlier about Belal Kape, a guy I pegged early on, said this guy is going to be a champion one day, mostly because he had such phenomenal wrestling. When I go back and think about his fight with Alistair Overeem, he just absolutely bludgeoned Alistair on the ground. He has nasty ground and pound. And yes,
disrespectful what he did to Alistair Overeem.
And I had this conversation with Curtis before the fight. I dropped the article yesterday where he said he battled against the idea that he somehow has a glass jaw because he has a couple knockout losses. And I said, do you realize the guy who's been knocked out, the guys who have knocked him out are Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis, and Sergey Pavlovich, arguably the three heaviest hitters ever in heavyweight. Yeah. So like, we all understand the narrative built around Tom Aspinall right now, but are we forgetting that he's still got to get through Curtis Blaydes on Saturday?
It's really easy for the fan base to forget about Curtis Blaydes and what a dangerous guy he is, in particular on the ground. But really, there have been some fights where when you see Curtis believing in his striking, he can look really, really, really good. I mean, he pieced it JDS on the feet. That's a task to be able to do that against one of the best boxers in the division. Curtis Blaydes, when he is believing in himself on the feet, but also recognizing that where he needs to take the fight is the ground, and he doesn't need to go out there and prove to everybody that he's some top-notch striker. When he can use the striking to set up the wrestling, that's when he's at his best, when he's blending his martial arts, because his ability to have disciplined, educated footwork, the way that he's able to find angles and use those angles to land a strike to set up a takedown, that's where Curtis Blaydes really shines. He's got a tremendous skill set. And like you said, to take a loss from Ngannou, Lewis, Pavlovich, I mean, this is heavyweight MMA. Look at the rest of his resume. He took big shots from the rest of a very tremendous, resume of heavyweight fighters. There's no way this guy has a glass jaw. The fact is that heavyweight fighting is a sport that's played on a razor's edge. And I wouldn't want to put a percentage on it, but much higher percentage than flyweight, the less technical striker can win, simply because one punch changes everything in this weight class. So, I don't think it's fair to write off the skill set of Curtis Blaydes, although he is facing what I do believe to be the most well-rounded most well-rounded heavyweight fighter that we've seen perhaps ever.
Now, I've said very openly, and I'm not saying this like knock. I mean, I think John Jones is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time,
I do too.
Without a doubt. But I've also had the opinion, and listen, by the way, I have no problem he's fighting Stipe. I understand that's a legacy fight for both of them. I'm not going to discount how much it means to them to fight each other. But I've also been of the opinion that I personally think that the winner and the loser of that fight is more than likely going to retire.
Yeah.
I don't know, and to John's point, I know people get upset that I've said this, and I know John said this. John doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall to prove himself as the greatest ever. He's already done that. And I understand why he wants to fight Stipe, because Stipe is the longest reigning heavyweight champion in UFC history. I get all that. But I've also said that I think both those guys, more likely than not, are going to fight. The winner and the loser afterwards are going to put their gloves in the middle of the octagon and say, I'm done. So do you feel like there is at least a small part here where Tom Aspinall goes out and makes a statement and he can declare himself as the best heavyweight in the sport? I know that argument's going to come up again in November when we think we're going to see Stipe and John, but we know Tom's not going anywhere. He's 30 years old, whatever. He's not going anywhere. We kind of have a feeling where John's going after one more fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I've never wavered from saying that John Jones is the greatest of all time. That's something that you're not going to hear change coming out of my mouth anytime soon. But currently, the best heavyweight in the world, I believe, is Tom Aspinall. And I think, I was going to say, unfortunately, maybe that's the wrong word, but I think when we see John and Stipe fight, it's going to be a tremendous fight. I think we're going to have our eyes glued to that fight. But are we going to get the answer as to whether he is the current best heavyweight by fighting Stipe Miocic, or vice versa. Is Stipe the best current heavyweight by fighting Jon Jones? I don't know that answer is going to be fully revealed in that fight. For me, it would take Jon Jones fighting a Tom Aspinall to cement that. Does he need that, though, for his overall MMA legacy? Absolutely not. No, he doesn't. He doesn't owe this sport anything else. He has already paid his dues. He has already cemented his legacy. So it's up to Jon at that point to figure out where he is, where his body is. To be honest with you, and I don't know how this would play out in terms of interim and undisputed, I could see Jon being much more interested in an Alex Pereira fight than he would be in a Tom Aspinall fight. How on earth that would happen with potentially Tom Aspinall sitting again on an interim belt that's feeling more and more like an undisputed belt? No idea. But just in terms of like interest from Jon Jones, I think he would find the Alex Pereira fight really interesting, because I think he would feel like he had a big advantage in that one.
And also, Al, I mean, and this is not a knock on Tom Aspinall. Maybe that'll change a little bit this weekend with him fighting at home. And I know the reaction he got when he fought at home before, but I think we all know Alex Pereira is a star. I mean, I think we all see that in him. There's a reason why Jake Paul wins over the weekend. He calls out Alex, not because he actually thinks he's going to get that fight, because we all know he's not, but because Alex is a name. And that's why you call that name. Just like you call it Nate Diaz, you call it Conor McGregor, you call it a name. No one really wants to fight Alex Pereira because we see what Alex is about. But I agree with you. That is, and this is not a knock on Tom Aspinall. It is a bigger fight right now. Jon Jones versus Alex is a bigger fight. You can sell it as champ versus champ, light heavyweight legacy, even though it would be at heavyweight. That's still in a way light heavyweight because that's Jon's division. That's it. So I agree. Like I feel bad for Tom because he's not going to get, he's probably not going to get either fight, but I think you're absolutely right. If Jon beats Stipe, I think the only thing he really sticks around for is probably Alex. And I think, let's be honest, the UFC loves to book big fights. I know Tom potentially would be going through Curtis Blaydes and still be without a number one contender or without a unified title fight.
Can you imagine what an absolute crap show that would be? I mean, I want to see these things, but there's also a part of me that likes to be organized, that likes to be logical, that likes things to happen the way that they should happen. And that part of my brain is just like, what on earth? Like, how is this even going to happen? But do I want to see Alex Pereira fight Jon Jones? I might be really interested in that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't, honestly? Let's be honest about it. The way Alex has fought lately, the way we know Jon Jones to fight, who wouldn't want to see that fight?
But I also want to say this because, goodness, I don't want to get that clipped by itself. I also want to see Tom Aspinall fight Jon Jones. I'm only saying that I don't know Jon's interest level in that one as much. And I'm guessing here, but I think it's certainly making for a fascinating scene. After we get past this weekend, the conversations to be had are aplenty.
Yeah, and listen, I agree. I think Tom Aspinall is phenomenal. I've been so high on Curtis Blaydes. It feels like I'm just happy he got to this moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like, this is one of those moments where it just feels prime for an upset because everybody's banging the drum right now. Tom Aspinall is the best. Tom Aspinall is the real champ, blah, blah, blah. And those are the moments, you know how the sport goes. Those are the moments when Curtis Blaydes comes out and lands a right hand 10 seconds in and it's over 100%. And Curtis Blaydes becomes champion. That's how this sport works.
100%. And that can and does happen at heavyweight very often. That's why the greatest heavyweight of all time only has, 2 defenses for Stipe?
Three defenses. That's it. Yeah.
That's not it's certainly not Kamaru's run. It's not Valentina's run. I mean, we see these types of very storied, dominant champions. 3 defenses is a lot. I'm not taking that away, but it just speaks to the nature of the division, how easy it is for one punch to change everything in this division. Honestly, one punch or one takedown. That's the truth at heavyweight as well. Just the stakes are much higher with everything you do out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, main event time, Leon Edwards against Belal Muhammad. It's so funny because I've talked to Leon many times. I've talked to Belal many times. Of course, we all know what happened in the first fight, a no contest with the eye poke. That was several years ago. And of course, I think people forget Belal took that fight on extremely short notice. It was originally, I think that was the Hamzat fight, if I'm not mistaken. He stepped in and took the fight with Leon. It's weird because these two guys don't seem to like each other very much, but it's really funny because to me, they have very similar career trajectories because you look at Leon. early loss in the UFC, goes on this long streak, winning streak, but people aren't really banging the drum for him to get a title shot. He finally gets it. He becomes champion. Belal Muhammad, early loss in the UFC, goes on this huge long winning streak. No one's really banging the drum for him to get a title shot. And now here he is. This does feel like a huge moment for both guys because Leon got through Colby, which I'm sorry, Colby never really deserved that title shot, but it is what it is. It's over and done with now. Belal's been on this huge long winning streak, just beating guys and really showing how good he is. But it's funny, these guys literally have almost the same story.
Yeah. No, it is. It's the exact same situation where they have been doing the work. You know, I like a fight where it feels right. It feels so deserved from both guys. And it is funny to hear, to hear them talk about each other. It's like, you guys have the same storyline. Both of you were winning and winning and winning and winning. And yeah, maybe not having tremendous finish after tremendous finish. And yeah, kind of getting some crap from the fan base about maybe not being the most exciting fighter. But what I just go back to is that one moment in time changed Leon Edwards' life, not just as a fighter, but like him as a person expressing himself as a fighter. And what I mean by that is like, you could tell that he always knew how good he was. And there are a lot of people that knew how good he was the entire time on the come up. There are a lot of people that despite the lack of finishes were like, man, this guy, I'm telling you, this guy is very good. He's very dangerous and he's going to make it to the top one day. You know that he felt that inside, but it's almost like you could see in that first Kamaru fight, the frustration of like, it's happening again. I know how good I am, but it's not happening for me. That one strike changes everything. And I truly believe that he is not just 30% better, as Teddy Atlas likes to say. I think he's 50% better now that he was able to win that championship. Because look at what he did to Kamaru the second time. I mean, not utter domination, but a really strong performance. And to do that back-to-back against the same opponent, so difficult to do. And then completely shutting out Colby Covington. Unfortunately for Belal, I can't think of two guys that would better get you prepared to fight Belal Muhammad than what he's been doing for the past, 3 years now? He's been training to face the best wrestlers in the division.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what do you see? I mean, I think we all know what Belal does really well. Pressure, relentless pressure. His cardio could go for days. I think this could be a 12-round fight, and he would still be going in the 12th round without slowing down. Great wrestling. I think people forget his striking has come a long way. Now, do I think he's as good of a striker as Leon Edwards? No, I do not. But I think people forget when he fought, Sean Brady, another dominant grappler. He went out there and knocked him out. That was one of his best finishes in recent years. So what do you feel like is the key for Belal Muhammad in this fight? Because Leon's a bit of an enigma because we've seen Leon get knockouts. But we also know Leon is more than capable of slowing the pace and just picking you apart from the outside and just never allowing you a moment to breathe, where it's frustrating. You can't get him down. You can't get him against the fence, and he just picks and just keeps stabbing at you from the outside with his jabs and his kicks. And he may not be that Shavkat Rakhmonov highlight reel finish, but it's frustrating. By the 5th round, your eyes busted, you're bleeding, you're sweating, you're tired, and it's just the same jab in your face, kick in your face, jab in your face, kick in your face. What does Belal Muhammad need to do to change the momentum and go out there and prove the world wrong that he actually is the best welterweight in the sport?
Well, he can't do what Colby did, which is feel that sense of invisible. It's almost like an invisible shield that Leon Edwards is able to put up by his superior range management. I mean, his ability to manage range and manage pace are some of his best attributes as a fighter. They're not always the sexiest, but that is what has allowed him to be superior in just about every facet of a fight. So Belal can't respect that. Belal has to be willing to walk through a little bit of traffic. And that's the hard part, right? Like, walk through traffic that Leon Edwards is putting out there. That's a dangerous prospect. It's a good way to get yourself knocked out, but he has to be willing to walk through a bit of traffic to make this a high friction fight. Colby just wasn't willing to do that because he knows in the back of his head, I can get posterized right now. I can get one shot, headshot dead, and add to the scalps that Leon has. Belal can't fight with any fear of that. And if he can go out there and be willing to wade into the fire, be willing to wade into the distance and make this a high friction fight and try to put Leon on the fence And listen, Leon is so dangerous in the clinch. The fact is there's not like an obvious path to victory for Belal. There just isn't. But a path to victory is to be very defensively sound early. Be careful, but just continue to wear on Leon, but in a very, I hate to say it, but in a very boring and defensive way. And then as the fight gets into potentially the 4th or 5th round, then you can start to get your offense going. Because when you are striking offensively, by default, you are opening yourself up. Anytime you throw a strike, you're opening that side of your face. And that's when Leon's speed, his precision, his positioning is just better than Belal's. Belal has to minimize the number of times that he's open for anything, and he's got to get close to Leon. And stay careful in the clinch as well, because the elbows of Leon, the knees of Leon, honestly, the takedowns of Leon. He has, I want to say it was, I had this stat the other day. Belal, I believe, has 34 UFC career takedowns. Leon has 24. Like, not that much fewer. I mean, we talk about his incredible striking because that's what jumps off the page, but he's a very good grappler offensively and defensively. So Belal's going to have to be incredibly careful through the first probably 4 rounds of this fight. And then if he has an opportunity to start to get things going when Leon is just a touch slower, and we know that Belal will never slow down. I think that I don't usually like to inject things that aren't statistically based into my fight analysis, but I do believe that Belal fighting for something that is beyond himself, for him personally, is absolutely huge. There is no chance in my mind that Belal will have a moment in this fight where he gives up on himself, where he tires, because he is fighting for, I mean, did you watch Countdown?
I did. Yeah, I did.
It's really good. It's really, really good. If anybody watching this didn't get a chance, go check it out. Like, you can see it's not just because he comes from Palestine. It's not just because it's part of, honoring Islam. It's part of who he is giving back and wanting to help people who are hurting right now. And I don't care where you lay on the political spectrum. No one wants to see kids in a situation being injured by something that they had nothing to do with. So all of that being said, I do believe that he's fighting for a purpose well beyond himself. And while it's difficult to weave that into a logical analysis, it's a real thing. And I think that it's going to help him in moments where he might be behind, or where he might be injured, or where he might be struggling. And I do believe Belal is capable of pulling off an upset.
Yeah, and I said this to him during our interview because I remember doing a story on him years ago when he was getting ready to fight in Abu Dhabi, and he was so excited to walk out with the Palestinian flag there because it was just such a meaningful moment to be in the Middle East and walk out. And I said, now Dana has allowed the flags back again, and he, of course, he's got emotional talking about being able to walk out with the Palestinian flag on Saturday because, of course, we all know what's going on right now and how much that means to him and that emotion. And then listen, let's be honest, we also got to know, Belal has to know, like, this is probably his one shot. Like, he's not going to, I mean, at his age, I think he's 37, 38, like, he's not going to be a guy that's going to go on another 9-fight winning streak to get a title shot. This might be a one and done for him. But as you said, that pressure makes diamonds, and I feel like that attitude might help him. Now, on the flip side, for Leon, I think we're kind of forgetting now, like, the run he's been on, 2 wins over Kamaru Usman, who I personally rank as the second best welterweight. I think it's George St. Pierre, and I put Kamaru right there next to him. 2 wins over him, and one, of course, the headshot dead knockout. We know about that. Beating Colby, who has been a perennial contender. And I don't think Colby deserved it, but hey, that's the sport. He got it, and then he got shut down, and Leon beat him pretty dominantly. Belal is the guy who's been on this long winning streak, beating a lot of guys in the division. I know people hate these questions, hate talking about hyperbole before a fight, but I'm not saying this is the one that's going to do it. But do we have to start getting into that conversation of Leon being in that top 2 or 3? He's not going to be GSP by beating Belal Muhammad. That's not a knock on Belal. He just hasn't had that win streak like GSP. But considering he does have 2 wins over Usman, he does have the win over Colby, and if he beats Belal, who's been on a huge long winning streak, are we starting to get into that conversation where Leon is getting near that upper echelon of all-time great welterweights?
I think he's getting near it. I personally think that, just like you said, because of the tremendous win streak of GSP, He's got a little bit of work to do, but he's close, man. I mean, you can't deny beating Kamaru twice, and especially back to back, because those are the toughest rematches, when the guy that just fought you and he can make all the adjustments that he needs to make based on a 5-round fight. You know, there was so much. It's not like he got caught early in the fight and, oh, let's just run it back. It's almost like it never happened. It's MMA, you get caught, right? He got beaten. He got beaten twice in very different fashions. And then, like you say, I actually think Colby, I mean, I know you say didn't deserve it, and I understand what you mean by that, but the fact is that Colby was at the top of this division for a very long time and gave Kamaru some of his toughest fights as well. So, yeah, listen, Leon taking out those two guys, I certainly think after this weekend, if he's able to get past Belal, he will be the greatest English champion that the UFC has ever seen. And I do think that he's well on his way to being considered in that conversation. I think to really be in there, he's got to spend a little bit more time taking out the sexy competition, like the Shavkats. And see, there I go again. Please don't clip that. By sexy competition, I mean the flashier competition, right? The flashy strikers, the finishers. So I think he would need to take out someone like a Shavkat and some of the other guys that are on the come up, but he's close, very close.
Yeah, and I know Leon had said something recently, like he doesn't feel like they're big money fights in the division. I think Leon, can make himself a money fight, but Shavkat's like the boogeyman kind of waiting in the wings for whoever wins this fight. You got Ian Gary out there, of course, Jack Della Maddalena coming out that huge win over Gilbert Burns. So there are legitimate challenges awaiting either one of these guys. I've always argued, I think welterweight is right along lightweight as like the two best divisions in our sport. And I think bantamweight has come up a lot closer now these days, but
yes,
I think there's still plenty of challenges for these guys in this division. And I know Leon had teased a little bit, like maybe one day do middleweight. Shavkat, Ian Gary, Jack Della Maddalena. There's still some really exciting fights out there for him at welterweight. And again, you start talking, he's already, 2 defenses in right now. Belal would be a third. I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to get to 9 like GSP, but you go through a Shavkat and Ian Gary and a Jack Della. If that ends up being your road, that's pretty daunting. So, there is a path there for him to get in that conversation. And
don't forget too, Islam Mokaev has toyed with the idea of going up to 170. And you would imagine that he would get an immediate title shot as well, regardless of weight class. So that would be another, although against a lightweight, it would still be at 170. So. And
Islam, I'm sorry, Dana. Islam is the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the sport right now. I love John Jones. John Jones is the greatest. Yep. Islam's number 1 pound for pound right now. I'm sorry, Dana. I got to disagree with you on that one. Yep. I think Islam's still number 1. Laura, this is a tremendous card. Of course, you're going to be working the desk this weekend, so I'm sure. And thankfully, you don't have to be up till 5 in the morning. You just have to be up to like 3 in the morning to work on. On the East Coast. Us East Coast people, man, we always have it the worst. All these people be like, I'm set till 5 a.m. Like, come on now. Yeah. You're in the Midwest, so.
I want to say all these like really insightful, deep, interesting things on that ESPN post show. And then when it's like, all right, guys, get ready. And 3, 2, and I'm like, oh my God, it's 2:00 in the morning. I can barely put a sentence together, let alone go on television right now.
They had the main line in the coffee at the end of the day right there.
Oh, no doubt.
I love it. Well, Laura, thank you as always for taking the time. I really do appreciate it, especially your insight. I love hearing what you have to say about the sport. Keep up the great work. I've said this to you very publicly. I've said it privately. One of the best color commentators in the game. I want to see you more on broadcast. I love seeing you doing the broadcast last weekend. So thank you for the time and look forward to catching up again soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Damon. I'll see you next time.